The main purpose of an iteration review meeting is to get feedback. One of the big benefits of an Agile software development approach is that it allows us to learn by interacting with working software. We get working software frequently. We have tools to help us replan and change directions and reprioritize as we learn. But I see a lot of teams squander one of the best opportunities to learn in the way they run their iteration reviews. I see two big mistakes that teams make that prevent the iteration review meeting from being an opportunity to really get some high bandwidth learning, some high bandwidth feedback. The first mistake I see is when teams treat this as a demo. In fact, they'll even call it their sprint demo or their iteration demo. And the problem with that is it can lead to a meeting that feels like a team just trying to prove to their customers that they did work that iteration. Now that's an okay objective, and it's certainly valuable to build trust and have your customers believe that you can do what you say you're going to do. But you can do that and get feedback if instead of treating the meeting as a demo, you treat it more like a user acceptance testing session. I learned this the hard way many, many times after showing great iteration demos and getting a certain level of feedback, and then doing a user acceptance test close to the review and getting much, much better feedback, actionable feedback, feedback that I wish I'd had in the iteration where we built that feature. And so those experiences have taught me that whenever possible, I want it to be the customer that is hands-on using the software in my iteration review meeting and not the team members demoing. Now this is fairly straightforward to do if you're all together with a group of stakeholders and customer representatives. It's a little harder when you're on the phone or on a video conference, but it can be done. And the key to making it the stakeholders, the non-team members, be the ones driving the software is a well-written, a well-crafted 1 or 2 page iteration review script. A good iteration review script doesn't just list the stories that were done. Instead, it walks the user, the customer, through the process of using the software in a couple of real-world scenarios that are going to take advantage of the new features that got built in that iteration. And that can be very engaging, and it can be a great way for the team to observe someone else trying to use what was built. I promise you, you'll get a lot more learning that way than if you just have the team demoing to the customer. So that's tip number 1 for better iteration reviews. The mistake number 2 that I see teams make in terms of not getting the kind of feedback they could from an iteration review meeting is when teams are actually afraid of the feedback. And the biggest source of fear, I think, is when we're worried that if we ask for feedback and we get feedback, that it's going to mean a lot more work for us. And so you'll see body language that discourages feedback, people rolling their eyes. You'll hear comments like, "Don't you remember we talked about that 2 weeks ago and we already settled that question?" And what happens in an iteration review meeting with a couple of those kind of comments is that the feedback gets shut down pretty quickly. The trick to not being afraid in an iteration review meeting is to separate explicitly the gathering of feedback from the commitment to act on that feedback. The iteration review meeting is a time to get feedback and to learn. It's not a time to make commitments. Deciding whether we're going to act on some, all, or none of that feedback comes later in a planning session in other meetings. So the iteration review meeting is an opportunity just for everyone to learn from each other. Yes, it should be enjoyable. It should be a great closure event for your team. It should be something people look forward to. And it is a chance to prove that we kept our commitments. But most importantly, the iteration review meeting is a chance for high bandwidth feedback and learning, which is so important.